is Natalie Warne. Natalie is an activist, a writer, a speaker. She is a lobbyist for youth in social justice. Her TED Talk has been seen over 1 million times. Her TED Talk came from an international human rights campaign that she was very involved in, and she focuses on how to engage youth in social justice. And this is one of these possible answers to what are we going to do with our time and how are we going to build interdependence. She's worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with Apple, with the MacArthur Foundation, with the Department of State. Everybody wants to know how we're going to empower, engage, equip all of us, but particularly youth, with the tools that they need to make a difference in the world. And so I'd like to invite both of them to come to the stage right now. And,
all right. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Warne, and that couldn't have been a better planted question at the time. And I wanted to, hold on, let me make sure this is correct. I want to first say how excited I am to be here. I'm so thankful for Laura and the whole team at the Center on Longevity for inviting us here, for inviting this intergenerational conversation, and to invite these conversations because I do think they are very critical, and the question you asked spurs directly into the whole point of what I'm here to talk to about, and also to say that I don't know all the answers, but I think these are the places where we do come up with them, where we do kind of put all of our heads together and saying these are our expertise as young people, working mainly with young people, but also knowing it is going to take an intergenerational approach to tackle these issues and making it a priority to do so. And so I'm so grateful to be here and thankful to have this conversation to continue these questions. I'm also going to kind of start with painting the problem as well, and then kind of going forward with more of the answers from what I've seen. I think that when I work with a lot of young people, I travel locally, internationally, speaking mainly to younger generations, mostly 16 to about 35 years old, on how to engage young people in social justice. What are the resources they can acquire to be involved in social change and implementing social change? And with young people, I think with younger generations, the main aspect that everyone, I would imagine, can agree on is that younger generations, I'm a millennial, we're the generation of connectivity. And I think it goes back to what the last panel was saying, that the generation of the digital natives, we were the generation born into the internet. I've known nothing but the internet. We came of age with social media, and I think that with so much of that immediate information at our fingertips, the imagery, the relevant events that are going on, whether that's locally in your neighborhood, whether that's internationally, or whether it's happening in a faraway galaxy, we can basically see it with the blink of an eye. And I think with young people, so much of this immediate connectivity, we a lot of times see the darkness first. It's so overwhelming in our digital news. And I know even for myself, this morning when I scrolled on my phone or on my iPad, the first thing that I come across is images and videos from CNN of the smoke that is still billowing from the rubble in Mexico City from the earthquake, and seeing the thousands of first responders and the community members coming together and joining forces to do whatever they can to pull bodies from the rubble and to save people. And I continue to scroll, and then I'll see the accounts of the proof of the ethnic cleansing that's happening in Burma, and me wondering, how have I not been so aware of this, and now it's just bombarding in the news. And then I continue to scroll, and I see a flashback Friday or a flashback Thursday, and I see my community of people that I follow on social media, my little echo chamber, and hopefully some people that are outside of my echo chamber that I follow as well, continuing to talk about how in the world in 2017, just a month ago, were we able to see neo-Nazis marching down the streets of Charlottesville and someone pummeling through a group of people in the name of white supremacy. And I think that with so many of these issues being so overly inundated to young people, it usually causes two responses. Two urgent, extreme responses that I've seen that this generation of connectivity has as a response to all of this that we see so often. And I think the first response is the urgency of now. The urgency of, we see it immediately, we see it in real time. It's not yesterday, it's real time. We're seeing these live Facebook videos, these live tweets, these live news articles, and seeing all the things that are happening in our community or in our world. And since they feel like they're right here, we have this urgency to say, I have to do something now. I have to do something now. I have to figure out what to do, how to get involved, who's doing what, whose values do I agree with that I can partner with. But on the complete flip side, this connectivity and this inundation of information has also created a national paralysis with young people, I believe, from what I've seen a lot of. It's the two extremes. And with this national paralysis, it's because of all of this overwhelming information, because of all of these things that we're seeing that feel so dark and discouraging, and so many young people feel like, my vote isn't going to change this. My voice sure as hell isn't going to change this. If I go out in the streets and march today, it'll make a noise, there will be tweets about it, but it's not really going to do anything about it, so why even take part? And from these two responses, I see so much that young people are being told right now to get involved, stay woke, resist, mobilize, do something, which I think is incredibly important right now. I think it's desperate right now for the times that we're in, but so often we're not telling young people how. We have this idea in our society that advocacy, learning how to advocate, is this quality that we're just born with. We should understand how it works. We should understand what advocacy even means. We should understand how to advocate for myself or for others. But in reality, it's not a quality, an inherent quality that we're born with that we have to just expect young people, or anyone for that matter, to just know how to do when they wake up in the morning and they see something going on. But it's a skill. It's a learned skill. It's a muscle that you have to continue to flex and to feed and to nourish and to practice. And I think that oftentimes that skill of advocacy or that muscle can sometimes, with many people, come out of necessity. Maybe because of their circumstances or their surroundings, they've had to flex and learn how advocacy applies to their life, how they advocate for themselves or advocate for others, and through the experience of it, they've learned the skill of advocacy. And that is my experience. In looking back over the 27 years of my life, have been able to see what I wasn't aware of as a young person, and now as an adult I've been able to look back and be very appreciative of, was this sequential kind of advocacy training that I had throughout my life because of necessary situations and necessities that I experienced. And all of it stems from my mother. My mom is my personal hero. She is a strong Black woman who raised her children to have the same sense of strength and pride. I'm the youngest of 6 children, and my parents, my mother is Black, my father is white, and I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a neighborhood called Englewood. And in our neighborhood, it was riddled with gang violence and poverty and a lot of lack of opportunity. And but in the midst of that, I was raised in this very strong, connected family. And my mom was a social worker my whole life, and she was a teacher my entire life as well, and a local activist. She championed for youth around Chicago. And my mom had this, both my parents, but my mom specifically, had this philosophy in our home. She used to say, honey, you can't be what you can't see. And she would repeat that to me over and over. Natalie, say it back to me. I can't be what I can't see, whatever. And as a kid, I just thought it was an annoying mantra that I didn't understand. But my mom didn't have to explain it to me because she embodied this philosophy throughout the walls of our small 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of Chicago. My mom had covered our walls in our home with the history and the voices and the imagery and stories and music and literature of strong Black and brown leaders throughout history and present day, to show my siblings and I what we were capable of. Even though we weren't going to see this representation in the world when we step outside of our neighborhood and into our school and into our classrooms, but we could know this when we went home, what our world could look like. And one of the main things that happened to my mother that really inspired me as a child is when my mom was 12 years old, she had the opportunity to meet Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My mom is in her mid-60s, and when she was 12, Dr. King came to Chicago. He was there doing many marches and doing a lot of advocacy work on behalf of workers' rights in Chicago. And my mom was chosen to be one of the little kids who got to interview Dr. King, and there's a photo in our house above our kitchen table that I've looked at every day of my life, and it's a photo of my mom at 12 years old staring into the eyes of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I realized all of these things that were kind of subconsciously scattered throughout our home as a child was my mom preparing my siblings and I to step out into a world and to be prepared to step out into a world that wasn't built to support us, that wasn't designed to support people who looked like us, who had the same skin color as us, who looked like my mom, who came from where we came from. But she wanted to make sure that we had these tools, that we had these nuggets to be able to survive in this and to be able to know how to apply these tools of advocacy to our life. And when I stepped out into that world, I was met with circumstances that I had to flex these skills of advocacy through intentionally learning things and just through experience. And two of those circumstances deeply resonated with me as a child into my young adulthood. And the first one has to do with my father, who is also my hero. My dad is one of the strongest-willed men I know, but physically he is very weak. My dad was diagnosed at a very young age with early onset Parkinson's, and he was also diagnosed a few years later, the year that I was born, with pancreatitis. And as a child, this was so discouraging to have to see my hero in so much pain, and then as a young adult, the advocacy kicked in, having to learn how do you advocate for a family member in this circumstance at our level of income? How do you know how to get the proper resources and the proper attention and the proper health care to make sure that he survives? And as a result of my dad being sick, we had to move a lot. We moved 4 times while I was in high school, whether it was to relocate to a different hospital or to a different job that my father and my mother had. And the first year of my high school career, I was 14 years old, and I went to a school in Michigan. And unbeknownst to my parents and I went to an incredibly racist school. When I was 14, it was a few weeks into my first year at this new school, and my siblings and I the bell had just rang, we all walk outside, and before the school buses come, which is where we all normally wait, 4 white trucks rolled into our school, and men with white hooded jackets were on the backs of these trucks, and they had these abrupt flags, these Confederate flags on the back of their trucks as well, and they were throwing out flyers that said, "The South will rise, death to all N-words," and they were yelling just outrageous racial profanity to so many young people. And they were white supremacists who were recruiting at schools in Michigan. And they happened to come to my school. And the result of this, very long story short, is it kind of created so much racial tension and this racial uprising to where there was violence, there was threats, and then at the end of the year, there was a death threat, there was a hit list with all of the students of color's names on it, and the school wasn't going to do anything about it. They weren't coming to advocate for the students. They wanted to brush it under the rug. And so all of the parents at the end of the year of the students of color removed all of us from the school and had us go to the school on the south side of the city. And these 2 experiences of my life had me respond in those 2 responses. I remember having that sense of urgency, that activist spirit that my mom had of, I want to do something, how do I get involved? I want to find meaning in these issues that are affecting my life and affecting the people that I love, but also this sense of just being paralyzed. Like, what do you do? Because when I was younger, I saw that some of those things that we fought for didn't end up having a good response. I felt like we lost when we had to go to this other school. And all I know is at that age, I just wanted a community. I wanted a community of other like-minded young people who also wanted to pursue justice, who also didn't really know what they were doing, but wanted to just do good for their communities. And when I was 17, I found that community. The last few days of my senior career, I stumbled across this documentary. And the documentary was called Invisible Children, and it highlighted a conflict that had been going on in Central East Africa for, at that time, 25 years, now almost 35 years, where a warlord and his rebel army were terrorizing Central East Africa and abducting children to be child soldiers in the rebel army. And I saw this documentary, and one of the main boys in the documentary was a little 8-year-old boy who had been abducted, who had fought his whole life in an army and then escaped. And all I could see was my nephew Lucas in this little boy. I thought, how in God's name is this happening? Just because this child was born in Central East Africa and I happen to be born in Chicago, how was this the trajectory of their life? And I was so overwhelmed with emotions, but I remember just shooting my hand up and being like, what can I do? What can one 17-year-old do? You've got to give me something. And they gave me something. And I know the difference between the many other nonprofits or organizations or causes that I had heard about when I was younger, and this one was this is the first time someone looked me in the eye at 17 years old and said, look, I know that you're young, but here are tangible ways you can get involved today. You can actually do something about this. You don't have to be a politician. You don't have to have a ton of money. You can do something today to make a difference in this cause. And I was like, done. Throw me at it. Give me the tools. Put me in the community. And I ended up working for this organization after I graduated from high school. And one of the main things that they told us that we could do to help bring more peace to this region was to pass a bill. They said if we could just get this bill passed through Congress, it would do two things. One, it would provide intelligence and support to apprehending the leaders of the rebel army. And two, it would provide funding and resources for the recovery of a region that had been devastated by almost 30 years of war now. And I was like, done, let me at it, having no idea what it takes to pass a bill through Congress. And so myself and a handful of other 18 to 25-year-olds decided to take a year to pursue this work, to try to kind of continue to hone the skills of advocacy and learn what this meant to be an activist. And our first task at trying to bring more attention to this bill was to put on an international awareness campaign called the Rescue of These Child Soldiers. And so in the rescue, our goal was in 100 cities around the world, we would have participants rally and stand in solidarity, bring attention to this invisible conflict that was going on. And we wanted celebrities and moguls or politicians to come show up to this event as well to stand in solidarity. And the hope was that we would raise the profile of this conflict in the eyes of the international communities and specifically our local government so that they could see what we were saying, that we were not going to continue to tolerate these crimes against humanity. And the catch was, in each of these cities, none of the participants were going to leave until someone of influence showed up to use their voice on behalf of this conflict. And I was in charge of 10 cities, planning 10 cities in my hometown, Chicago, and I was like, we have to get Oprah. Like, that's the most obvious thing. If Obama had been my hero at the time then, I would have probably said Obama or Michelle, but at the time, it was Oprah Winfrey, and just having no idea what would go into all of this. So we have 4 months, just a handful of young people to plan all of these events and thousands of hours of logistics. And 4 months later, on April 25th, the events began. In 100 cities around the world, over 100,000 young people showed up to stand in solidarity with these child soldiers. I was in Chicago, and there was over 3,000 people in torrential rain standing in the middle of Grand Park in Chicago to stand in solidarity for this issue. 6 days after the event had started, all cities had been rescued, except for Chicago's. And we stayed outside. We literally marched every day. We called the White House, we called news stations, we slept in church gymnasiums, we slept under bridge viaducts, and on the 6th day, we wrapped ourselves around Oprah's studio in an attempt to get her attention, and we got her attention. This is a short clip from a film called Together We Are Free, documenting this event and our attempt to pass the bill.
First, when I drove into the office this morning, there was a giant, when you all came in, was there a group outside? Yeah. Holding up signs asking if I would talk to them for just 5 minutes, so I was happy to do so. And they are with a group called Invisible Children, and I told this group outside that I'd give them a minute to state their case.
Oprah, thank you so much for having us. Basically, these folks out here have seen the story of 30,000 children abducted by a rebel leader named Joseph Kony. And they're out here in solidarity, and they have been out here for 6 days. This started 100,000 people worldwide. Now it's down to 500, standing strong, so that you can raise the profile of this issue and we can end the longest running war in Africa and rescue those kids that are child soldiers still in East Africa.
Oprah, I have to say, this girl Natalie here, she's 18 years old, she was an intern for us this year, and she said, my one goal is to get Oprah. She had 2,000 people come out on Saturday, but it rained. She stood here in the rain with 50 people. When they heard she was here, hundreds started coming. People are here from Mexico, Australia. Natalie's 18. Don't think you're too young. You can change the world any day. Start now. Start today.
Was it worth it?
Now, thank you. Now this experience, I was the person who was featured in this short documentary film about this event, but I was just one of 100 other interns my age from all different backgrounds who worked their tails off to make this happen. And we were only 100 of over 100,000 people who came out in support of this event. And this was my first experience with the concept of so many people from so many different backgrounds, so many different socioeconomic backgrounds, different faiths, coming from different countries, all different ages coming together with the one common goal of saying, look, we see an injustice. There is something so terribly wrong going on to these children, and we're gonna do whatever it is in our power and our capacity to make a difference. For some of us, it was working full-time for a season at a nonprofit. For other students, it was taking a few hours a week off to show up to an event once to say, hey, I know that me standing here matters. And as a result of that, 6 days after the event, the bill was introduced into Congress. 1 year later, the bill passed unanimously with 267 co-sponsors in Congress because over 10,000 young people showed up to DC to lobby for it. And a week after that, President Obama signed the bill into law. 1 week, a year later, a second bill was passed through Congress redefining justice in this region, and today the violence of this rebel army has been reduced 92%. And now I know that that isn't perfect. There's still so much going on in this region, but this experience taught me so much. And one of the main things it taught me is in the pursuit of social justice, there are two routes. There are a few routes. And one of the routes is burnout. You can work your tail off, you can stay up every single day, every single night, feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. If you don't get up tomorrow and work your ass off, then it's just not gonna happen. And then you burn out. And the second route is the sustainable route. What is it that we're going to do to prioritize our health, especially with young people, giving us the mentality that it is about prioritizing our health and prioritizing our wellness so that we are as equipped as possible to be able to tackle these issues. And for me, in this experience, I took the first route. I was young, I was excited, I wanted to make a difference, I wanted to seek justice with all of my friends. And in the process, after this event, amazing, good results happened with this event, but I ended up hospitalized because I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating healthy, and it took a full season after that of me to realize, okay, that is one approach, but if my goal is social justice, is implementing positive, long-lasting social change in my society, in the issues that matter to me, then I need to take a different approach. I have to do it in a healthy way. I have to seek my mental health, physical health, so many different aspects. And so it was such an educational experience for me, and because of these experiences that I had, I ended up wanting to tell as many other young people about what young people are capable of, no matter what industry you're a part of, the fact that you can make social change if you work hard, and how to do that sustainably. So I became a speaker, and I traveled the country and internationally, speaking to young audiences about how to get engaged in social justice. And fast forward a few years, on November 9th of 2016, my phone is blowing up. My Facebook messages are blowing up. My text messages are blowing up from principals of universities that I spoke at, from students of high schools, from clients of mine at the US State Department, and people in a resounding kind of cry for help saying, we have so many young people who are so discouraged at the state of our country, of what's going on, who feel so much divisiveness. This was just kind of the tipping point, but for the last year, for the last 2 years, they've been saying, how do we get involved? What do we do? How do we do something? And they so desperately want to get involved, but they just don't know how. Help. And I realized this was the extremes. So many people were seeing all of the things that we've been seeing, so overly inundated on the news, and saying, what do? I have to do something, but just not knowing where to start. And when I look back on my life and seeing the entirely long 27 years of activism training that I've been through, sometimes it's still difficult for me to even know what to do. So how can we expect other young people to just know what to do at the blink of an eye, and then if they don't, cast so much judgment on them not participating? And so I took some time and thought, when in recent history did a group of young people come together and try to find long-term sustainable actions because of an issue that they were facing so that they could create a healthier, more equal future for them and the people in our country? And I came back across the student organization SNCC, SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And SNCC was a student-created organization in 1960, created by black students in the South as a result of the Montgomery bus boycotts and all of the situations that were going on in the civil rights movement. And it was a group of young people who created this committee because at the time, with everything that was going on, people were coming from all over the country trying to participate, trying to say, we want to do something, but not knowing where to start, not knowing where to channel their energy. And so this organization of students started so that they could spearhead the focus, so that they could provide training. They were saying, if young people are going to be a part of the sit-ins, we want you to do it responsibly, we want you to do it in a safe way, and we want you to know your resources. They were a huge catalyst for the freedom rides. They organized the freedom rides, saying, if people are going to go, we have to do this in a productive way so that we're taken seriously along with the older generation who's spearheading the civil rights movement. And they played a major role in the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And when SNCC was first created, for students, by students, Dr. King and a lot of the other leadership team from the civil rights movement saw what the young people were doing, and they put a gathering together so that they could make a public announcement of their support and approval of what these young people were doing, how their approach that they were taking on the civil rights movement to implement change, and an approach that they were inviting white people, they were inviting men and women to say, it's going to take all of us, we just need to do this in a productive, safe way. And in this gathering, Dr. King called the efforts of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee a creative protest of their time. He said, you students of North Carolina have taken the undying and passionate yearning for freedom and filtered it in your own soul and fashioned it into a creative protest that is destined to be one of the glowing epics of our time. Whether expressed in sit-ins at lunch counters, a freedom ride in Mississippi, a peaceful protest in Georgia, a bus boycott in Montgomery, it is an outgrowth of the insistence that evil must be resisted and no moral man or woman can patiently adjust to injustice. Now, what is fresh, what is new in your fight is the fact that it was initiated, fed, and sustained by students. What is new is that the American students have come of age. You now take your honorable place in the worldwide struggle for freedom. Now, I believe that these words ring so true and relevant today as well. I think that right now what so many young people want, and similarly at the same time, at that time what so many people wanted was a movement. But what we need is consistent, persistent mobilization. And I think that when you think of the creative protest, of Dr. King's concept of this creative protest, it wasn't one particular event. It was the relevant approach of their time, the new approach to tackle something that age-old systems weren't working anymore. So we had to bring a new approach for the time to tackle these issues. Now, I think, in my opinion, in order to tackle the same issues today, especially when it pertains to young people, is we need our own new form of a creative protest. Today, there has to be a new approach in order to attain a healthy, more peaceful, and long-lived society. And so when thinking about this concept of a creative protest, I completely shifted all of my focus. In order to be able to create a more healthy, long-term society that young people can participate in, I wanted to shift all of my focus in being able to help them do this as easily and as productively as possible. So my main focus was training. I started creating activism training curriculums around how to equip and empower and educate young people on the tools on how to implement advocacy into their everyday life. How do you make it a part of your lifestyle? The second aspect was shifting the perspective of activism as a lifestyle. Activism is not something that for most young people we think we only participate in on November 8th or during the Women's March or if you work for a nonprofit, but realizing, as you were saying, these issues that are surrounding our country and our society, from our economy to our healthcare to every aspect, applies to our everyday life, and helping young people be able to re-see this in a new light so that they do participate more frequently. And the third aspect is shifting the perspective on who does have the power to implement social change, on showing young people that it is not just the 1%, that it is not just politicians, that it is not just activists, that every person does have a part in playing in shifting and implementing change in our society, but it's about providing the options, it's about making it more accessible, it's about representation, and showing young people that it has to be this community effort, that it is people coming together from different demographics, different parties, different backgrounds, different religions, and saying, these are our differences, and we have to learn to coexist in them in a healthy way to move forward. And what I love about this gathering today, that I'll close with, is that I believe that this is also so necessary in a creative protest, in this new approach. When an institute like the Center on Longevity brings an intergenerational approach, when we bring people across different demographics, across different backgrounds, different expertise to come together and say, we're gonna focus on these issues. And not only do it in here today. What I have seen in my crash course of longevity in the last 8 hours is that what you all are doing is you're doing it out there as well. We're not just talking about it. And I think that is so critical, especially for young people to believe that it's actually going to happen, is we have to see it. We can't just hear about it and talk about it. So thank you for what you're doing. And I encourage you to continue in all the efforts that you guys are working in your fields. Bring young people into the conversation. Make it an intergenerational approach. We need you, and we want to be a part of these conversations, but a lot of times it's about creating the space to do that and creating the platform for young people to have a voice in these conversations as well. So thank you so much.